live on this little picture thing?
Mine says live.
Oh, okay. So we're actually live.
We've been live for a few seconds.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I just want to start out by saying I'm in England with really terrible Wi-Fi. And Farah, you know how terrible it is here. So
I
at
do
any
now.
moment I could drop and you'll be left doing Facebook Live on your
I don't know how anyone in England does anything in the modern world now. That is what I learned from visiting you. Hmm.
when you first got here, you were like, no, it's fine. No, everything's great. No, it's good. And then by the end of it, you were like, oh,
Well, it was when I tried to upload my classes, which I'm required to do, and it told me it was going to take 40 hours.
I tried to upload a minute or our outtake video today. It was a
Oh
minute and
gosh.
19 seconds. A minute and 19 seconds on Instagram took 5 hours. 5 hours. A minute and 19 seconds. I almost died,
It's a little
literally.
sad. Okay, we're talking about rapid the so we
I oh
finished.
wait. I just want to say Farah forced me to do this. This
Oh
was
yeah,
not
sorry.
my idea at all. So this
Well,
is
what
one.
happened? What happened is Jill was always telling me we're gonna do a Facebook Live, and then the other day I was like, "Hey Jill, let's do a Facebook Live." Like I thought she'd be very excited, and she was like, "Okay, sure, I knew it. This is what I've been waiting for you to be the one to say let's do a Facebook Live." And then yesterday she goes, "You're forcing me to do this."
I don't know what you're talking about. Usually I have a script in my mind and stuff, and I'm being held hostage here on Facebook in England.
Across on a different continent.
Yeah,
Um,
I just had to
okay,
say that you're holding me hostage.
we're okay. So we I what I the reason I said was that we finished with helping lots of students with their early
Applications.
applications.
Yeah,
So that's early
lots of
action, early decision.
cool
Mhm.
students. Shout out to our families.
Yeah, seriously, it
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. Okay. So, but wait. So what? So I'm gonna ask you, what's your takeaways from this year so far?
Well, we just talked about this before we
We
went live.
did. Uh-huh.
And I said everyone was a little crazy this year. And I mean that in the nicest way. But everyone, parents, students, everything just went a little crazy this year. We talked about this a little earlier in our last Facebook Live that we're just seeing the effects of the pandemic, what we think was the pandemic and affecting students and parents. So
Yeah.
that's one of my takeaways. It was a hard year for everybody this year applying to colleges.
Yeah.
I would say another takeaway is to start way earlier than you are thinking you need to start.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that comes back to, I mean, what I'm seeing is that a lot of students are really successful in some areas of
Mm-hmm.
academics and so forth, or like or jobs and activities, or they're doing
Mm-hmm.
something that really shows that they're college ready.
Right.
But then there's some other piece where there's more. I just am seeing more disorganization among, and this is in my classes too because I
Yeah.
teach.
Yeah.
And it just I don't think it's their fault. I think that, like, the dynamics of a lot of things have changed in the last few years, and they've had to ride through it, and I think it's been rough on everyone. And
Yeah.
early in this application season, in one of our professional groups, I saw someone say that an admissions officer had said to them to tell kids to stop writing about the pandemic and their pandemic experiences. And some other people said, yeah, that they'd heard that too. And I haven't personally heard that as a piece of advice, but it made me kind of sad because the kids who are graduating now started high school in the pandemic.
The pandemic.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, like, so for example, UGA, University of Georgia,
Yeah.
changed their prompt this year to be about a book that influenced the student
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
in that transition from middle school to high school, which I thought was an interesting prompt. And I only had a couple students applying to UGA this year, but it's an interesting prompt.
Yeah.
And it recognized, like, just how crucial, like, that moment is in
Between
a
middle school and high school.
yeah, that, like,
Yeah.
eighth, ninth grade. And
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that's
That's
when
when the pandemic went.
that was the pandemic. And the other piece too is that there's these other kids coming up the pipeline and they got it in middle school. And I think that also has, now I'll be curious to see if that's the case for homeschoolers as
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
because I'm hearing from I am hearing from friends who work in public schools and in schools that those kids are struggling too. I'm not sure if that'll
We're
translate as
hearing
much for
that,
homeschoolers.
students are struggling in their first year of college this year really
Yes,
bad.
I'm hearing that.
Student,
I've
a
gotten that
lot.
feedback from
Yeah,
a
me too.
couple of students on a few campuses.
Yeah.
Yes.
And students are struggling with these applications, and I do book clubs for teens, and I have lots of students not finishing the books right now. And it's just like everything's a little disorganized a little bit. Like, I just think everyone needs to settle a bit. We need more time. I think the pandemic has affected people more than for longer than people really want to acknowledge, and that's why they don't want anyone writing about the pandemic anymore. They don't want to keep reading these essays,
Yeah.
but it had some, for some people it still affected them, and it still is, which is why I would say start early, because one
Yeah.
thing I noticed this year is that it doesn't matter. There's a certain piece of the application that students are struggling with. And it might be the activity list, which is really hard to do. I've had students working on that at the very last minute, can't get the activity list organized, and you've got limited characters. Or it's like the essays, and there's so many essays and they can't get organized around it. There's just like pieces that are becoming roadblocks for students. And the earlier
Or
you
it's the
start, the
list. I mean,
less
I've seen it
stressful.
be
Yeah.
different things. It's
Yeah. The
just,
list. We were working with students on the list like 2 weeks ago for some students. Like,
yeah, which is okay. I mean, but I think there's
it's
just some
stressful
added,
though
and
for the
it's,
families.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not just our client, it's everyone.
No.
I'm hearing it
Yeah.
from other professionals, and I'm seeing
Yeah.
it in our group, and
Mm-hmm.
I see a little bit. And the other thing I see is that it's on the college end, it's still like, I sort of had this idea that this year, SAT scores
Yeah.
it would be clearer, like, when to submit and when not to submit. And
Nope.
I didn't feel that at all. I feel like, if anything, it's become less clear,
It's very much less clear.
because some schools are clearly de-emphasizing it in a way. Like, there are some schools that have said your score will not impact our decision unless it helps you. And
Yeah.
that's a bunch of, including some really prominent name
Yeah.
schools,
And
have said
that's
that.
great.
And you've got other schools. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that is great.
It is
And then,
great.
so then if a student submits and it's borderline, if it doesn't help them, they just ignore it. They don't
Yeah.
even bring it into the evaluation. But then you've got, so, and other schools where, like, it's, they're admitting 80+% of their class, 70-80% of their class test optional. So great, like, you're safe here, like, you can apply test optional.
Mm-hmm.
That's homeschoolers too. But then you've got other schools that clearly it matters, and it's hard to get a handle on their numbers. They're not really transparent. And when you look at the range of their admitted student scores from last year, they are through the roof.
Yeah.
And
Which makes
that's
sense,
just,
right?
it does
Yeah.
make sense. But when you're comparing, like, say you've got a student who made, a pretty strong score, like a 1450 or something.
And they're debating whether to even
I know,
submit
and
it.
they're debating, should they even send it? And it's like, that's a really strong score. That, a few
It's
5 years
it's
ago would have
unfortunate.
been in range for a lot of
Yeah.
schools, now is out of range for those schools.
I I think it's very unfortunate. And, I work
Yeah.
on the college list with a lot of families, and we were going through this and deciding what schools to submit scores to. And it's not easy to figure out. It really isn't. And especially for homeschoolers, because usually at a lot of schools, a test score can help a homeschool.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep that in mind. But the ranges have just gone through the roof. And it's like, do they want to see it? Do they not want to see it? Should we submit it? I think it's the opposite effect of what a lot of schools thought it would do when being test option. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
It would make it more relaxed. It would take it down a notch.
Yeah. And it's
stress. But it
yeah.
is actually,
and it's a big piece of how we advise now. Like, we have to go through every school and decide, and there's a lot of pieces that go into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're looking at it and we're saying, it's a guess. So
yeah. Because it's so new, and we only have the data we have.
Yeah. If folks have questions, they should put them in the chat and we will try to answer them.
I just want to say, because I am in England, that if anyone thought this was going to start earlier today, because I put it down as an event and said 2 o'clock, I think Facebook did 2 o'clock England time. And so, which would have been like 9, 10, 11, 12, East Coast time, which would have been 6 a.m. in California. I was out walking with sheep at that time and making videos, which I do. So I was not here to do the Facebook Live. And I think some people message and
she told me too.
So yeah, I did message you and told you to post something because I was out. So well, you can't see the event for some reason. So I don't know.
I don't know. Events
Yeah.
is broken. But
yeah,
add questions. So a couple people asked me things that they wanted to ask. So one person asked me what something I thought was a good question. So about a kid had gotten an award, like from the county 4-H, a couple of awards.
Okay.
And
okay, great.
should they?
That's
they'd
awesome.
already sent in their application. Yeah, but they'd already sent in EA applications. Should they alert the colleges?
I think that's not a huge thing that you need to alert the colleges. I assume 4-H is in the activity list, and the students probably pretty active in 4-H to get those awards. I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think it's going to make or break anything.
Yeah, I agree. I do think there are some things to alert schools to, though, and I think that's a good point. I mean, one thing we saw this year were a number of like little mistakes in the in applications.
We saw that
we fielded some questions about that in our group, and we saw that from a couple of clients, and it just these things happen. If it's if there's a typo in an essay, let it go.
Completely.
And the same thing with formatting. The Common App has had some extra formatting glitches this year. So like if your essay suddenly is bolded and you didn't realize, it's okay.
It's fine.
So I think that's not the end of the world. If there's a class that's completely different, you filled it out wrong, you forgot something entirely, those are reasons to contact the school. So if there are big things like that, if a student does, win like a major national award or something, then there can be a reason to contact schools and let them know.
Let me ask you, who do you think should do the contacting, the student or the parent as a counselor?
Oh, the student, hands down. The only case in which it should be the parent is if the parent's paperwork is the place where there was an error or something.
But for awards or something, the student should contact the school and let them know.
Yeah, and the same thing about classes, honestly, too. Like if it, if there's a change in a course or something, like, then I think that's. And what about bad things that they have to contact about?
Like bad grades or a failure or something in the class, or what are you thinking?
Yeah. Like classes is mid-year grades or D's.
I mean, well, first of all, the mid-year grades are going to go on the mid-year report, so school will see that. And then I think a student can reach out and say, this happened. Will this affect my application? Looks better if the student's doing it. They take responsibility a little bit.
So someone asked a really good question. About, so let's say you turn in your application and it's you hear back immediately. Like sometimes now you hear back in a week or less.
Oh yeah, or less. Yeah.
And that's awesome. And then other times you don't hear. Does that mean something's gone wrong?
No, I wouldn't assume that. No. Don't assume that.
No. So sometimes it just takes longer. It can, and different schools read applications in different ways. So there's this thing called rolling admissions. So some schools publish that they have rolling admissions, but some schools don't say we have rolling admissions. They say like, oh, we have these deadlines because you need to get it in by those deadlines.
Yeah, but it's rolling.
But in reality, the way they process the applications is rolling. And so they'll process it as it comes in and then tell you right away. But others, they take them all in, they wait, they want to evaluate the class next to each other. So they're making decisions about admitting a class and building a class. And that's a different way of doing admissions than rolling. And so if they're doing that, then you won't
I
have
would
someone.
also say though, like if you're just talking about one college and some student heard back right away and another student's still waiting, that doesn't always mean anything either. Like sometimes, different readers are reading them, especially homeschool applicants are in a different pile. It might just take longer. So I wouldn't read into that, even if it's just one school.
Yeah, it's that's very true. I remember
Yeah.
there was one school when my son applied where it seemed like everyone had
Oh, I
heard.
remember that. Yeah.
And it wasn't, by the time that he heard, it wasn't even really a top pick, but it was sort of
Yeah.
like,
Like
wait,
what's going
what?
on here? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a little confusing. I was like, "Oh, did we do something wrong? Like, is he not going to get into this school?" Because it was kind of like it was like a low target. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is kind of surprising."
Like what's happening? Yeah.
Yeah, and then he heard, and I think it was maybe that he was like in the homeschool pile
Homeschool
and
pile.
applied to
Yeah.
a less common major, and I mean, there were just a
Yeah.
number of reasons.
Yeah. You never know what's going on.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I just think that's it. But this highlights something too, which is and I posted an article. I don't know if you saw that, Jill, about direct admissions,
Yeah. Hmm.
which is like a big thing now.
Yeah.
And some students don't need this, but for some students, it's like doing these ones where they turn it around really quickly. Such a boost.
Yeah. It's really nice.
It makes you feel so much better when you have an acceptance, even if it's like this is your last choice. It
You
makes
feel
you feel.
immediately better. I mean, you're just like, I got my first acceptance. I know I will go to college. It's just like, and then
Yeah,
you can
I know
just
I can.
relax a tad and
Mhm.
just wait for everything else to come in. This is why we always
Exactly.
have like a school like this on most of our students' list, just so they can hear back and feel better and relax a little bit. It's a boost. It's a big boost.
Yeah, I actually think, students in general, they should use that. And most students need to have a couple safeties on their list anyway.
Hmm.
Schools that do rolling admissions are usually safeties for students. Some of them are really good schools too, so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a bad school.
Or some of them have like a good program that your student's interested in
Oh
or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
absolutely. And it,
Yeah.
so you can have a school that tells your student really quickly, like
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
so you've gotten
Yeah.
in, and then you're waiting for some other schools, these schools that are sort of weighing your student against who else has applied that year.
Right. Right.
And so then they'll hear. So some schools release all in a big batch, so
And
everybody
some of
has
them
this.
are they're like separate little batches too. Like you might
Mhm.
hear at one point and then the next point. So don't
Yep.
worry.
Yeah. So they'll release a bunch of decisions, but then not all of them. So
Yeah.
it's a little
Yeah.
all over the place.
And every
Um,
school is a little different. This is this is the whole thing with college applications. It can be a little
yep.
stressful for all these reasons. That's another takeaway I have this year is that the colleges were a little all over the place too, switching things at the very last minute in the Common App, dropping essays, adding essays. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff. This year was just a little chaotic for everybody, I feel like.
I mean, I've noticed a lot more. I mean, I complained that the Common App was extra glitchy this year, but it
Yeah.
also is the case that schools were using it differently. And
Yeah.
there seem to be more schools that have something in the student's portal than there used to be like a couple years ago. There've been more, it felt to me like, as someone who does the essays, like there were more essays that got switched in the first weeks of like, in September
Right.
and even
Yeah.
into October in some
Or some
cases.
got dropped at the last minute after students
Right.
worked on
So
them.
that
Yeah.
students have done it and then they go
Yeah.
into
And
the
then they're
essay
like,
zone.
oh, yeah. They're
Yeah,
like,
we just
no, we don't
decided
want
to
it.
be
Yeah.
nice,
We
except it
decided on
wasn't
October
nice.
15th to
I
drop that.
know. Yeah, or schools that changed their dates, which
Yeah.
also is a bit
Hmm.
annoying. And sometimes
Hmm.
it's in favor of the student, but then it's like, okay, but
But it's so last minute. It's so last minute. Schools were doing that this year.
yeah. And again, sometimes they do it in response to like because something was glitchy,
Yeah.
so then they're
Yeah.
giving you some extra days to get those early applications in. But I
It's just
just like
stressful.
that
It's
it's
adding to the chaos
mhm.
of college applications. I read somewhere, I don't know, where I read it, or maybe someone said it, that the Common App is feeling, because the Common App was supposed to be this common application where you put all your information in, it goes to all the schools, and there wasn't separate applications for each school. But now it's starting to feel like there's so many separate requirements for each school that it's getting a little out of hand.
Yeah, it feels like it's sort of a little worse this year. I mean, particularly
Mm-hmm.
because there are a couple, there's a few schools that have joined in the last few years, like
Yeah.
University of Washington and some of the
Mm-hmm.
Texas schools.
Yeah.
And so just a few schools that have joined that don't take the Common App essay, so they still have like
Mm-hmm.
Western Washington, you just copy paste your Common App
Into
essay into their
their
box.
box.
But that's so confusing. Like,
It's
why?
not very clear on the application
No,
either.
it's not clear.
Not at
And
all.
and then and then there's a couple schools this year that, like Northwestern, pulled, they're not reading the Common App anymore. Instead, they want, like, I forget how many, it's a bunch of little prompts,
Yeah.
basically, shorter
Yeah.
ones, a little bit more similar to the PIQs for the UCs.
Yeah.
But that just adds to a student's stress.
Yeah.
And a couple schools I noted that never used to have essays, like Dickinson, now have an essay.
Shout out to Dickinson.
I mean, it's an optional one, and
Yeah.
but
Well,
it's still, I was like,
is it
oh,
optional? Here's a question. Are those optional essays really optional? What do you think? Does it probably matters. It depends
well,
where, it
first of
depends on.
all, some of the essays are like, have you been convicted of a felony?
Okay.
And so if your student has not been convicted of a felony,
Don't
it
answer.
really is optional. They don't have to explain why they haven't been convicted of a felony. Like, it's totally all good.
I bet you someone has actually.
I, I mean, I have no doubt, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
But other essays that are,
so I I feel like when they ask why this school, or tell us more about an activity, or these kind of basic supplemental questions, I don't think those are
mm-hmm.
optional. Now, there is
No.
this in between category this year with the Supreme Court decision. A lot
Yeah.
of schools have a question, and a number of them have made it optional, um, about community
Mm-hmm.
diversity,
Yeah.
perspectives, and they're all phrased a little differently. Some of them are focused on, like, your community and your place
Uh-huh.
in it. Others
Yep.
are focused on discrimination and your experiences of it, or injustice and your experiences of it. And those can be yourself or others. Like, so they invite
Mm-hmm.
students to write about standing up for others. They
Yeah.
invite, and they also invite students to write about them broadly. So your community can be your tennis club, like, or it
Yeah.
can be your ethnic group, like your
Right.
church, like it can be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So they're pretty broad, but some of them are done in a more narrow way. And I think some students really struggle to write about those issues. And if your student is really struggling with it, I think it's okay for it to be optional. Like,
Yeah.
I actually think that one is one.
Yeah.
Now, I do encourage
Yeah.
students to take a stab at it. Um, but if they are
I,
really struggling, I
yeah.
actually think if it says optional, it's optional. Sometimes it's not optional. Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
required
Yeah.
supplement.
Sometimes some of these, like why this school, and it says it's optional and stuff, those type of essays, it's just an opportunity for you to, add to your application. And it's kind of like course descriptions when we were talking to parents, should you do course descriptions? And it's like, well, why skip course descriptions? Because it'll just help the application if they read it. It's the same with some of these optional essays. If it can help your application, do it. If
Yeah,
and if you have
absolutely.
trouble answering one, and like you just said, then don't do that one.
I saw students struggle a lot more with the why this school essay.
And why do you
Um,
think that is? Because usually we're able to set, give pretty good guidelines on that. And
yeah, I think I'm not really sure exactly. I'm not sure exactly. I've got thoughts, but I'm not totally sure. I think those
I
essays have always been a little hard.
they are hard. They are hard. But I think students this year are just being a little ambivalent about the whole process. So they're not really sure why this school. I think they're feeling ambivalent. Do they even want to go to college? I think some students aren't even 100% sure on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could be part of it. Um, I mean, in order to do that, you have to have a lot of investment in your college list. You have to have
Hmm.
researched your schools.
You had
You
to
have
have
to
had
really know
time to
it.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have had time to do it. Space, with all your other commitments.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
harder if you haven't had a chance to visit the school. It just, and some
I,
schools
I
make it
will say
easier
though,
to do, and some schools make it
yeah,
hard. They just don't have as much
I,
information.
I just want to do say that, if your family can't get to a lot of schools to visit, and that was the case with my family. We just didn't have the resources to go visit a ton of schools because I was a single parent with 3 kids. You can do a lot of research online, and not just the school website, but you can look at what other student experiences are and stuff, and see why you want to go there, and maybe a program or something you can
Hmm.
talk about a little bit, or do a virtual day or something. But
Yeah,
I mean, don't feel bad if you can't actually get to these campuses and look at all these schools.
yeah. I so uh, there was one other question which I'll get to in a second. A couple other
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
But
I can't see the questions, so I
I
don't
know
know.
I'll give you. But the other thing I wanted to think about, going into this season, I help students with essays. I thought that AI was going to be a big
Oh
improvement.
yeah, yeah.
No,
Nope.
I haven't. Nope.
I
I think.
know. It's so funny.
Yep. I thought. I mean, the Common App prompts took longer to come out, and I had a
Yep.
theory, and I was not the only one who thought that maybe they were delayed because there was a lot of debate, and I heard that there was some. But schools seem to still be really relying on their essays. They seem pretty
Hmm.
confident in, reading student voices and interested in student voices. So I think
We talked about that a little bit about student voices and that I think in our last Facebook Live, and how important it is student write these essays and not have tons of people looking over and giving feedback and stuff. And I think colleges really are good at telling that, telling if it's written by a student, if it's in their voice, if it's their story or not.
it's a reason not to over workshop your kid's essay.
Yeah,
Like to
definitely.
just have like one or two people tops sort of helping them with it. And to really leave most of it on them, and then the people helping are giving generalized feedback, and
Yeah.
then are literally just copy editing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not, messing around with every word choice. I mean, sometimes students have chosen awkward phrasings or individual words that you want to help, but like there's just a limit. You have to kind of let it go. It really needs to be in their voice.
Yeah.
And I think, and straightforward is better.
And
So
it needs to be an essay they want to write.
yes, exactly. Um,
Don't give your team a topic. Let them figure it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone asked about that it seems like more students are submitting longer lists of schools, like more
Yep.
applications.
Yep.
And do we see that
That's
having an impact on admissions and wait lists? Yeah.
Wait lists are out of control.
Wait
They're
lists
just
aren't wait lists anymore. They're not
no,
real.
no, they're just so out of control. So if your student gets on a wait list, I mean, a few schools they do pull from the wait list, but
Yeah.
most schools that they have like thousands of kids on these wait lists, and it's just like, what is happening?
I think the idea of a
So
wait list calls back to a time. I mean, to this idea that like admissions is somehow linear, which is the
yeah,
thing that I'm always it's not like there's like the list of students and they all get a rank and then they get admit the ones that
yeah,
are they admit the top 1,000 students. Like that's just not how it is. And when they waitlist students, it's not like they're in a list and they're going to slowly come off. It's
no.
not like, in the queue for tickets. Like it just isn't that way. And it's like they don't, so yeah.
I mean, the UCs pull from wait lists a lot. They're one that really do. Some of these big state schools do a little bit.
Yeah.
My son, this was 5 years ago or so, got off, at Berkeley, UC Berkeley off the wait list. So you never know, but I wouldn't count on wait lists at all.
No.
I wouldn't tell your student they're meaningless because that's not something they want to hear, but they
I
can't.
actually I would tell them it's close to meaningless in most cases because
Oh,
there's
Farrah, you're just
I'm
breaking
a
their
dream
hearts a
killer.
little bit. Oh no, don't tell
I
your,
think I do think I mean,
it's meaningless, student. Don't,
you make
don't
it so
even
weird.
think about
I guess because
No,
they
I get
shouldn't
where
get
you're
their
coming from.
hopes up. Like they
No,
shouldn't.
I get it.
The
Yeah.
worst situation is when a student is on a wait list for the
And
school
they're
that they just want to go to the most. And there's 2 or 3 other schools that they've gotten into. A lot of the time they're just as good. And they can't commit their heart because they're
they're
just so
not
stuck on,
bonding. Yeah.
yeah. And that's not good.
That's like when you tell students don't go look at Harvard or Yale as your first school you visit, because there's a ton of others and you need to, get attached to some of these others. Yeah. I was kidding you. I get it. I get it. But I think it's good to get on a wait. I mean, it's nice. You apply to University of Chicago or something, you get waitlisted. Okay, that's great.
Means that they kept you in the mix to some extent, but
Yeah.
like a lot of these schools, they're waitlisting half the applicants, so they're only rejecting like they're of the applicants who they didn't offer spaces to, they
Yeah.
waitlist half and reject half. Like it just is
Yeah.
not. And so then
Yeah.
they've got, for every space that might, for the literally, especially these schools that are really hard to get into, and they
Yeah.
have a larger yield number that they're more sure of, the that's the number of students that they offer places to versus
Yeah.
accept them. Yeah. And that they may only offer like 20 or less spots from that wait list, and they've got
And
5,000
maybe,
students.
yeah, maybe only five,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So if your student gets waitlisted, just have them look at their other schools that they got accepted in.
Fall in love with the
Do
places that want you,
Yeah.
like at
And the
that
ones that
point.
you can
Yeah.
afford and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I have seen that students are applying to longer lists. We're encouraging students to apply to
Yeah.
slightly longer lists than we
Yeah.
did a few years
Definitely.
ago.
Yeah. But one
I
of the
mean,
reason is that, and I'm seeing this because I do the list, I'm seeing this everywhere, is that it's really hard to say what schools are safeties anymore. It's just hard. So the list needs to be a little more expansive. It's just the way
especially
it
the
is in the
states in the
current climate.
middle, they're just a
Yeah.
little less predictable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So applying to more is always a good strategy.
But more does still have limits. Students shouldn't be applying to like 50 schools. It's just too many.
No. Oh my gosh. No.
Yeah,
Not at
a
all.
longer list means like 10 or 12 schools. It doesn't mean like, or
I mean,
even
some
15.
students are doing up to 20. I
Yeah,
mean, I've seen,
20
yeah,
isn't insane, but like it just,
I wouldn't go over 20,
no, definitely not.
never go
And
over
we
20.
encourage students to have it a shorter list than that, typically.
Typically, it depends.
Most
It depends.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody asked earlier a question about the FAFSA.
Oof. We don't
When?
know. We don't
What
know
are the
nothing.
updates? What updates are there, Jill? Do we know any?
We know
Does
nothing.
the government know any?
The government's not sharing.
No. I
No,
noticed.
we just don't know. I mean, that's unfortunate.
I don't think it's going to be December 1st.
It's adding to the chaos of this year.
It is. There's no way. If I could put money on this, which you're in the UK, can't you bet on anything in the UK?
I can bet on anything. I don't think people in the
Don't they
UK
take
care about
odds
this.
on like everything there? Isn't that a thing?
10 to 1. 10 to 1.
So I would put money down that there's no way the FAFSA is coming out on December 1st.
I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if like the day before they're like, I don't know. I do 50-50.
Yeah. And I think colleges are frustrated. So
Yeah,
I know
definitely.
that some schools that don't usually use the CSS profile are using it. I noticed,
which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. Though they can control which data they're getting. So because the CSS
No, I know the CSS profile can be very hard in certain situations for certain families. Yeah.
And it just is rougher. But then I know that I saw that some students have they're getting information in their portals about the financial aid stuff, and some of it they can't do yet. And
no,
so I think
it's not up to date, and it's just
and so it's just frustrating for
kids, adding
stress.
Yeah.
And some schools, I mean, I think schools are all handling it differently. If there's a school that well, I mean, let's see what happens.
The big takeaway here is that no one can fill it out yet, though. So it's not like it's just you that can't fill it. I mean, no one's able to access it. So everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's annoying.
It is annoying. Yeah. CSS profile. If you are a divorced parent and you have to do the CSS profile, there is a waiver if the other parent is not involved. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
I had to, yeah. So that's nice, you know, if you're stressed about that.
Yeah, and you can call
Okay.
and talk to financial aid before your kid is in, you
Yeah.
know.
You can get a, yeah, you can get an estimate.
Some
Yeah,
schools
you
will
should
give you
use
a
these
rate.
net. Yeah, you should do these net. What is it called? Now I'm getting
Net
tired.
price calculator.
I want to say it's like really late here, but it's only 7:35. Is that the time? I'm so tired. I'm so tired. That's because it starts to get dark here super early.
Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap up in a minute. Any other questions, stick them in there. And we're happy to answer. Okay, so takeaways.
Here's my takeaway. We are
Crazy
already
year.
crazy year, crazy families, crazy parents, crazy kids, crazy colleges, crazy FAFSA. It's everyone's
Crazy
feeling the
us.
same.
I mean, I felt a little like
We did a dance video, so of course crazy us, you know. So yeah, we're all crazy this year. It's okay. We're all in it together. Other takeaway though, we have a bunch of juniors this year we're working with, and we're already starting to meet with them and schedule meetings for the whole, you know, to start
well, we
working on
were doing
college
this
lists and
last year
stuff.
too, but we were, I think that we are looking ahead and feeling like kids just need a little bit more hand holding.
Yeah,
So we're doing that. I think
yeah.
probably we'll continue that. We don't have, we don't really have spaces for juniors right now. Some might open up, but
We may take.
we
Yeah.
might take, and yeah. But we do have spaces for freshmen and sophomores.
Freshmen, sophomores, and we take eighth grade too. So
Oh
we got
yeah,
spaces for all
we
those.
start
Yeah,
just this year. We're starting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think it's gonna. I think it's just going to continue to be a confusing landscape, where you've got on the one hand these
I think
great
for a few
schools
years.
offering
Yeah,
direct admission and like it's really
yeah,
easy and kids can just walk right in and you can keep your paperwork to a minimum, and then at the other end, like, wait, why do these schools have such radically different requirements? I thought the
yeah,
Common App was supposed to be one thing, and
yeah, and it's not.
why is my kid writing 20 essays, and why is the
Mm-hmm.
so I just think it's
And why are essays popping up after we apply? And
right. And what do you mean I have to make a video now? And
yeah, and like,
and like
what's that new social profile thing that everyone's has this year? They want,
glimpse.
yeah. It's like, what else do
And
you want these kids to do? Like,
so I just think it's about, I mean, I just think like that landscape is going to continue to be as, as much. But again,
yeah,
that's all the more reason to take advantage of these schools that even though I don't really like that they're pushing for these early applications. I mean, these kids have barely started their senior year and they're like,
yeah.
it's already like people are saying to them, oh my gosh, have you applied yet? It's too late, for this
That's
school,
another
this
really
school.
good takeaway, though. It's not too late if you're a student and you haven't applied yet. There's lots. And we talked about this last time too, but there are a ton of schools that are still open. They'll be open for a while. You have a lot of time. So don't worry
Early
about it.
applications, all these schools have regular
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
And
And some will be taking students after May. So it's okay.
yeah, no, they'll take them. Yeah, many schools,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
will take students, well into the spring. So there's always
It's fine.
options.
Yeah.
Kid can
There's
choose when
always
they want.
options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're taking late seniors now.
We're taking late seniors. Anyone needs help in the process, reach out to us.
Yeah.
We suddenly have space.
Yeah. Now that most of our students have most of their applications in.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. We're doing good. All right. Okay. Anything else? Is that it? I can't
I
see.
think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
I
good
finally did a
work, see?
Facebook Live. I finally did a Facebook Live that you wanted to do.
I just felt like we should because you're always making me.
You finally made me do something. Okay. Awesome.
Okay. Okay, thanks
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Wait, how do I